Makes Me Wanna Holler by Nathan McCall. Chapter 17, Denial. Black men born in the U.S. and fortunate enough to live past the age of 18 are conditioned to accept the inevitability of prison. For most of us, it simply is the next phase in the sequence of humiliations. Being born a slave in a captive society and never experiencing any objective bias for expectation had the effect of preparing me for the progressively traumatic misfortunes that lead so many black men to the prison gate. I was prepared for prison. It required only minor psychic adjustments. From Soledad Brother by George Jackson. There were several guys crying in the holding cell where I was taken after being sentenced. All were black and all had gotten time. The dude with the lightest sentence, a tall, burly guy with greasy hair, was wailing loudest. He had a measly 5 years, the sentence I had hoped for, and was boo-hooing like a baby. I wanted to strangle him. We were issued thin mattresses and old, wrinkled jail clothes, and 3 of us were marched upstairs to a 6th-floor dormitory cell. When the guard closed and locked the doors behind us, I stood there and scanned my new home. I was in jail, the one place in America that black men rule. A gloomy mass of concrete and steel, it was one large open space that looked like an oversized lion's cage. The largest area was a day room with 2 steel picnic tables. At eye level in front of the tables, an old black and white TV sat on a wooden stand mounted to the bars. Across the room, in the far corner, were 4 fully exposed toilets. Another corner held an open area with 2 doorless shower stalls. Opposite that section was a sleeping area lined with bunk beds, like an army barracks. The cell block held about 35 inmates. All of them were black. It felt like I was in the motherland with all those black faces around there. Some guys sat at tables in the day room and watched TV, played cards, and talked quietly. When we entered the cell block, a few inmates glanced up at us, then went back to what they were doing. A few others watched closely, in the way that jailhouse veterans study newcomers. I learned over time that the manner in which a person enters a jail cell provides some essential clues to those already there. Seasoned inmates can tell a lot about a guy just by how he acts and what he does when he first walks in. They can tell if it's his first time in jail or if he's a regular. They can sense whether he's scared to death or fearless. A new guy's demeanor determines who approaches him, when, and how. An inmate walked over to the 3 of us and motioned for us to follow him to the sleeping area. He showed us vacant bunks, then watched while we got settled in. I picked the lower bunk near a corner, flopped down my mattress and dived onto it. I stretched out on my back, put my hands behind my head, stared up at the ceiling, and thought about my predicament. I thought, 12 years. I'm never going to make it. I couldn't conceptualize it. Every time I tried to register the length of the sentence, my brain rejected it, spit it back out. I thought about the trial. The judge had acted like he took it personal that I robbed that place. I understood what that was all about. I shot and nearly killed Plaz, a black man, and got a 30-day sentence. I robbed a white business and didn't lay a finger on anybody and got 12 years. I got the message. I had gotten it all my life. Don't fuck with white folks. I was startled by a voice nearby. It was the guy who had met us at the door. Yo, man, what you in for? I answered without looking at him. I got a robbery beef. What'd you rob? A store. Oh, yeah? How much time did you get? That was the wrong question. Look, man, I don't feel like going into all that. I turned over onto my side with my back facing him. He rose and left to interview the other newcomers. I lay there and stared through the bars at the ugly, mustard-colored wall across the corridor. There were several long, narrow windows along the length of the wall. From my bunk, I could look through one window and see the night sky illuminated by thousands of speckled city lights. They were fluorescent street lamps and moving headlights from cars going back and forth over the Elizabeth River tunnel bridge to Portsmouth. I thought, it will be 12 years before I get out there again. 12 years! I couldn't believe it. I went to sleep that night, wishing I would wake up the next day and come out of this terrible dream. Over the next few days, I noticed that something about this cell block differed from others I had been in. There was more odor to this one. The inmate who greeted me the night before gathered the other newcomers, brought them over to my bunk, and explained the workings of the place. He said the cell block was reserved for motivated inmates. Unlike in the Portsmouth jail, where guys could stay in bed all day and sleep their time away, inmates in this cell block were required to program throughout the day. Inmates who went through the program could earn good time, days subtracted from their sentence for good behavior. It was something the jailers allowed to help control inmates to provide an incentive for them to behave. Guys from all over the jail try to get transferred here because we run the best shop in the house, the inmate boasted. We program hard. I saw inmates working together, filling buckets with water and gathering rags and cleaning detergents. They mopped floors and cleaned the bars and tables. The place smelled like ammonia. A guy called Chicago ran the cell block. He was a tall, muscular guy with a thick southern accent, and he was very articulate. The jailers addressed him by some alias, but the inmates had named him Chicago because that's where he was from. The word was he was a street gang leader who had gotten busted in Norfolk for robbing a bank. Unlike Nutbrain, Charlie Gregg, and me, he was supposedly a black revolutionary who had done it for a cause. Like me, most of the guys in the jail had never spent time around a revolutionary before, much less talked to one. We all hated the white man, but few were committed to fighting him in an organized, disciplined way. We had meetings in the cell block, and when Chicago spoke, everybody sat quietly. He talked about what was going right and wrong in the cell block. He talked with such authority that you assumed he should be in charge. When he talked, everybody paid attention, from the hardest-nosed thugs to the most bombed-out junkies. I learned over time that he knew his stuff. He was well-versed on philosophy, politics, and law. He knew how to organize against the system. I've never seen a black man who can handle white people so well. He spoke to white jailers like he was their equal, like they weren't keeping him locked up so much as he was letting them detain him for a while. Chicago had real power in the jail. When he summoned guards to the cell block, they came. He could have inmates shipped out the cell block at will. He had special arrangements with inmate workers in the cafeteria to get the best food. Anybody less dynamic than Chicago would have been roused by guards at night, taken to a solitary cell, and given a thorough ass whooping to mull over. But if they'd done that to Chicago, it would have started a riot in the jail. There were no whites in our cell block. There were so few whites in the jail that the administrators were careful about where they placed them. I think the jailers knew it would have been unwise to put whites in our cell block with Chicago around. When he preached about the legacy of slavery, he got inmates so fired up that they wanted to strike out, and whites in the cell block would have been convenient targets. Chicago also directed our daily therapy sessions. The sessions were designed to encourage self-improvement, but he used them for more. He talked about the double standard of justice in America, how blacks regularly got big time for petty crimes, and how white boys routinely stole millions and walked. Chicago also rapped about the need for us to challenge inhumane conditions in the jail. He tied the two topics together so eloquently that it made me feel like I was a political prisoner rather than a two-bit stick-up man. We also took time in those therapy sessions to talk about ourselves. Each prisoner took turns on a hot seat, where he talked about his background and answered probing questions from other inmates. The object was to get us to look within, to talk honestly about the personality problems and distorted views that landed us in jail. I learned through those sessions that most of the guys in the cell block had grown up poor in and around the Church Street area, where Shell Shock and I had done most of our stick-ups. Many were so poor that they lacked money in their inmate accounts to order toothpaste and other essentials from the canteen. They gambled with cigarettes and bartered to get what they needed. A lot of them were in jail with small bonds that required only $100 or $200 to get out, but they remained confined for months because they couldn't scrape up the chump change from friends and family. Few had made it through high school, and a lot of them were functionally illiterate. The majority of the guys had been arrested for drug-related crimes, but the criminal charges ran the gamut, from drug dealing to murder to flim-flamming. Many of the guys were longtime hustlers who knew each other from the streets and had previously done prison time together. The most popular old head in there was a likable junkie in his early 50s who had been in and out of prison all his life. His name was Moses Battle. They called him Mo for short. He was the elder statesman of the cell block. Mo Battle came to my bunk one evening after I'd been on the hot seat. He introduced himself and said he was curious to know how someone who had spent a year in college had wound up in jail. He called me Youngblood because I was one of the youngest guys in the cell block. Youngblood, you say you from Cavalier Manor? Yeah, that's a nice neighborhood. I know some people from Cavalier Manor. We started talking, and I became as intrigued with Mo Battle as he was with me. Youngblood, you say you been to college? Yeah. He said, I got my GED in the penitentiary. I took some college correspondence courses too. Well-spoken and shrewd, Mo Battle was a born leader who read a lot and loved to share his wisdom with younger guys like me. We spent long hours in the evenings sitting on our bunks talking. His favorite subject was philosophy. He saw philosophical meaning in everything, including some of the petty shit that happened in the cell block. If two guys got into a rumble over food or cigarettes, Mo had a theory about why they bumped heads. He theorized a lot about jail guards, whom he hated. He said the difference in guards and inmates was so slight that if you took away the guards' uniforms, you couldn't tell them apart. He said guards were losers with little dick complexes and a serious need to boss anybody around. One day, when one guard, a real knucklehead, came to the block to let an inmate into the cell block, Mo Battle said, "Look at him. I bet you he comes in his pants every time he turns those keys." Mo Battle taught me how to play chess. I had never been exposed to the game on the streets. Like him, the other guys at the cell block who knew how to play had learned on previous trips to prison. They adapted the game to their street perceptions and described tactical maneuvers in their own language. They called the queen, the most powerful and versatile piece on the board, the bitch. A guy describing how he was checkmated after losing his queen would say that his opponent took my bitch and fucked me up. Mo Battle taught me chess by explaining its philosophical parallels to life. You can understand the game of chess if you understand the game of life, and vice versa, he said. In life, the person who plots his course and thinks ahead before he acts wins. It's the same with chess. One day, I made a move to capture a pawn of his and gave Mo Battle an opening to take a valuable piece. He smiled and said, "You can tell a lot about a person by the way he plays chess." People who think small in life tend to devote a lot of energy to capturing pawns, the least valuable pieces on the board. They think they're playing to win, but they're not. But people who think big tend to go straight for the king or queen, which wins you the game. I never forgot that. Most guys I knew, myself included, spent their entire lives chasing pawns. The problem was, we thought we were going after kings. Mo Battle also pointed out the racial symbolism in chess and how it reflected society. The white pieces always moved first, giving them an immediate advantage over the black pieces, just like in life, he said. The most important thing that Mo Battle taught me was that chess was a game of consequences. He said that just as in life, there are consequences for every move you make in chess. Don't make a move without first weighing the potential consequences, he said, because if you don't, you have no control over the outcome. I never looked at life like that. I had seldom weighed the consequences of anything until after I'd done it. I'd do something crazy and then brace myself for the outcome. Whatever it happened to be, I had no control over the outcome and no control over my life. When I thought about it, that was a hell of a stupid way to live. But on the chessboard, I eventually saw that I could predict and, more important, control outcomes if I considered the consequences of moving before making them. That gave me a whole new way of looking at things. After Mo Battle shared his philosophy, I got hooked on the game. Over the months, I got a fair enough command for chess to beat most of the guys and give Mo Battle a run for his money. I was fascinated by Mo Battle's range of knowledge. He knew a little something about everything. It made me wonder why he wasn't doing more with his life than being a jailhouse sage. After I got to know him better, I asked him about the contradiction I saw in him. Yo, Mo, if you got all this knowledge, why you ain't running the country? As always, he came at me straight. 'Cause, young blood, I'm one of the dudes that got all the knowledge in the world while I'm locked up, but I can't execute when I get out. Why can't you execute? The sparkle in Mo Battle's eyes dimmed. 'Cause, man, I'm a junkie. By his own admission, he was a slave to heroin, which he and other junkies in the cell blocks pronounced heroin. He'd already written off his life as a failure. I've already blown it, young blood. If I had gone down a different road, I think I could have been a college professor or a lawyer, but I got dealt a different hand. I'm a junkie. I gotta have that heroin. He told me that he had picked himself up and made many new starts after getting out of the penitentiary, but he'd fallen down as often. The frequency of those falls convinced him that the pull of heroin was stronger than his will to resist it. He said he had a loving wife and family who supported him during his trips to prison and through drug treatment programs, but he'd been more loyal to the heroin than to them. Most of the criminal charges he caught through the years were either for possession of drugs or for ripping off people to get drug money. It's like a woman in love with a man who she knows is no good for her, but who makes love to her so well that she can't let him go, even if he drags her into the gutter. That heroin makes love to me, man, and I can't let it go. He got his breaks from addiction when he went to prison. He seemed almost grateful. It gave him a chance to dry out, to read, think, flirt with all the possibilities of what he could have become. He and other junkies in the cell block were taken to the dispensary every day to get their doses of methadone, which helped ease their withdrawal pains. He'd always say to me after he returned, "Don't be like me, young blood. You got a chance, man." I seriously doubted he was right about that. Ordinarily, after being sentenced, guys are shipped away to some prison, but the system was so overcrowded that we in the cell block had to wait for openings at prison compounds. I spent 6 miserable months in a Norfolk jail, and after a while the days and nights merged into one continuous run, measured by the meals we ate and the routine we followed. For me, the toughest days were the weekends, when I normally would be out partying. Most inmates were subdued on weekends because the weekends made them long more for the streets. I'd lie on my bunk and listen to tunes playing on a portable radio in the cell block and wonder what was going on in the free world. The singer, Minnie Riperton, had a hit song that depressed me. She'd sing, "Loving you is easy, 'cause you're beautiful." My heart sank and I thought about Liz every time I heard that song. It seemed that DJ played it 50 times a day just to mess with me. I marked time and kept up with what was going on outside by the letters I received from Liz. I learned that a popular guy in Portsmouth named Sweet Wolf got 40 years. 2 guys I grew up with got life sentences for robbery and murder. Shane got into a fight at Nick's pool hall downtown and went back and shot out the windows. Cooter caught a robbery charge. It seemed that guys I knew were going to the penitentiary and getting killed like there was nothing to it. Charlie Gregg and Nutbrain, who went to trial a month or so after me, each got 8 years. They got less time because I was the gunman. They were sent to different floors in the Norfolk jail. We sent messages to each other through inmate hall boys approved to travel throughout the buildings. Sometimes we paid inmate cafeteria workers cigarettes to deliver messages when we came through for chow. Despite the many ways I learned to keep busy, time dragged by slowly. I spent much of that time in denial, believing that something would happen to get me out, that some high-level white people somewhere were going to review my case and realize that the punishment was too harsh for the crime. I had Liz and others write the judge, and even the governor of Virginia, asking them to reconsider my case. But time passed and nothing happened. When reality hit me, I settled in to do my time. I was lying on my bunk on Wednesday, flipping through a magazine when a guard appeared at the cell. "McCall, front and center, you've got a visitor." I jumped up, rushed to the sink for a glimpse in the mirror, and went through the open gate. The guard escorted me to the tiny visiting room. When I stepped inside, I saw Liz and my parents on the other side of a thick glass partition that separated us. Bampoose, my grandmother, appeared from behind them and waved at me. I smiled, waved back, and took a seat between several other inmates who were talking quietly through the phones to family members and other loved ones. I lifted the receiver and spoke to Liz. "Hey, baby, how you doing?" "I'm all right. Monroe's okay. Everybody's doing fine. How about you?" "I'm fine." Actually, I was annoyed. Liz picked up on it and said, "What's the matter?" I asked, "Why did y'all bring Bampoose? I didn't want her to see me in here like this." She shrugged her shoulders. "I know, but she wanted to come, so we couldn't say no." "Yeah, I understand." We talked a few minutes more, then my parents took turns at the telephone. Finally, my stepfather helped Bampoose to the seat. I'd only been locked up a few months, but it seemed Bampoose had aged a lot since I had last seen her. She looked frail and brittle. She put the phone to her face, smiled weakly, and said, "Hey boy, how you doing?" "I'm fine, Bampoose. How about you?" "I'm all right." "They treating you good in here?" "Yeah, the food ain't great, but I'm all right." As I spoke, I felt myself choking inside. And all the other previous weekly visits from family and friends, I've been able to put on a strong face. But the sight of Bampoose weakened me. I was ashamed for her to see me in jail. For all our lives, Bampoose had quietly set an example of hard work and sacrifice in our family. In her dignified way, she'd always been there to lend support to everybody and done what she could to help. Everybody wanted Bampoose to think well of them, and I was no exception. There was a song that reminded me of her. It was a tune by the Spinners entitled Sadie. That was Bamboose's first name, and it seemed as if the song was written expressly about her. The song was about a woman who provided strength and support in her family. I thought about Bampoose whenever I heard that song. "Sadie, don't you know we love you? Sweet Sadie. Place no one above you, sweet Sadie." It also bothered me to think that with her rapidly advancing frailty, she might not live to see me get out. When our 10 minutes were up, I felt relieved. That was the one time I was glad to get out of the visiting room. At other times, I looked forward to those Wednesday visits like children look forward to Christmas. On visiting days, the whole cell block seemed to come alive. We played the radio louder and talked more. Guys waiting for visits paced near the cell block entrance. Others climbed onto the horizontal supports to the bars to look through the windows, which overlooked the visitors' parking lot. I couldn't help noticing how much they looked like caged monkeys climbing the bars like that. Over time, though, I've craved the sight of the outdoors so bad that I climbed too. If you climbed high enough, you could see visitors drive up, get out of their cars, and walk into the building. There was something else outdoors that caught my eye. In another parking lot, not far from the visitors lot, lawyers and other people on official business left their cars while they came to the jail. There was an interesting contrast between the two lots. Most of the folks who parked in the visitors lot coming to see inmates were black. Those parking in the business lot were white. I could distinguish the lawyers. They drove up in sleek Porsches, Mercedes, and BMWs and got out in their expensive suits carrying briefcases. I realized that white criminal lawyers had created a cottage industry supported almost exclusively by blacks. They built lavish lifestyles by profiting from our despair, and we cooperated fully. Played right into their hands. I had never thought about it until then. I had known that with Chicago in charge, there was always a possibility of trouble, and sure enough, the kettle blew. Fed up with the deteriorating conditions, Chicago called for a boycott of activities until some of the problems were addressed. Under his instructions, no one would go into or out of the cell block for anything until we got some results. We drafted a list of demands that had to be met. Concrete steps had to be taken to ease overcrowding, improve the quality of our food, and give us prisoners more time to research our cases in the jail's law library. Chicago had requested a meeting with the jail administrator, but the administrator refused to meet with us. Then, in a show of force, a battalion of guards in helmets and riot gear stood menacingly outside the cell block entrance, brandishing clubs. The floor captain called out to the inmates bunched up near the entrance. "You all gonna cooperate, or do we have to come in and get you?" Chicago, of course, spoke for us. "What you think we gonna do? You got to come in here and get us. And don't forget, you got to take some to get some." When it became clear that the inmates were solidly united, the floor captain tried the old divide and conquer routine. "I realize that some of you fellas probably don't want to be in with the troublemakers. We're going to give you a chance to separate yourselves from this mess so you don't get hurt and damage your chances of getting out of here. All those who want to go to another cell block can step forward now, and we'll transfer you, no questions asked." For a long moment, there was silence. Then several inmates stepped forward and walked through the cage leading to the door. In my heart, I wanted to leave too. I was afraid that if I took part in the riot, I'd lose my good time or blow my chances of making first parole. But I couldn't bring myself to punk out. It just wasn't in me. So I stood there, ready to go down with everybody else. When the inmates who had chosen to had left, the guards readied themselves to storm the cell block. They prepared tear gas guns to shoot into the place. Following Chicago's instructions, we all dampened towels and wrapped them around our faces to protect us from the gas. Just when it appeared the rumble was about to start, the administrator appeared. He pretended that he had just learned of the disturbance and asked what was going on. Chicago spoke. "You know what's going on. We requested a meeting with you to talk about our grievances, and you sent your henchmen instead." "That's fine," he told us, "but I can't have you taking over my jail. Get some representatives together and come on down to my office and talk." We picked Chicago, Mo Battle, and a few others. They left instructions that if they didn't return by the day's end, we should tear up the place. With that done, the standoff ended. As a result of the meeting, some of the demands were addressed. Inmates were reshuffled to ease overcrowding. Jail officials claimed to have improved food, but I saw no noticeable difference. The most significant change was our increased ability to use the jail's law library. At least once a week now, inmate representatives were allowed to go there for a few hours and do legal research for themselves and other inmates. Because I was considered educated, I was among the representatives chosen to do research. Of course, the jail administrator won the final battle. Under the guise of easing overcrowding, he changed the makeup of the cell block until there was almost an entirely different group of people. I was sent to another cell block down the hall. I don't know what happened to Chicago, Mo Battle, and the others after that. I never saw or heard from them again.